The Lynette Brown Show. This be the Lynette Brown Show.
She's always ready and on time.
The Lynette Brown Show.
When you got something that's on your mind.
The Lynette Brown Show.
Whatever you got going on, she knows the deal.
The Lynette Brown Show.
Well, we always keep it real.
The budget of your organization, and I had to look at that person and say, I'm sorry, sir, you don't know me. I'm not a consensus leader, and I do not determine what is right and wrong.
The Bryants lived with their two boys in cramped rooms behind the store. Roy's half-brother, J.W. Milam, helped out around the grocery. The 235-pound Milam was a hard-drinking man with a reputation for being tough on anyone who got in his way. Emmitt went in and bought 2 cents worth of bubble gum. According to witnesses, on his way out of the store, Emmitt turned to Carolyn Bryant and whistled.
In the morning, about 2:30, I heard a voice at the door, and they said, "This is Mr. Bryant," and said they wanted the boy that did the talk at money. There was a man standing with a pistol in one hand and flashlight in the other. So we marched all around through 2 rooms, and I found the boy in the 3rd room in the bed with my baby boy. And they told him to get up and put his clothes on.
Mose Wright pleaded with the 2 men. He's only 14 and he's from up north. Why not give the boy a whipping, Wright begged, and leave it at that? J.W. Milam turned to Mose Wright. "How old are you, preacher?" he asked. 64, Wright replied. "You make any trouble, you'll never live to be 65.
I could hear all this beating, and I could hear this beating, and I could hear this crying and crying and beating. And I'm saying to myself, they beating somebody up there. I heard that even before I got to the barn. I passed, they still was beating, I can hear that. Milam came out, so he had said, "Did you hear anything?" I saw him, he had a khaki pants on, had a green nylon shirt, and a 45 on his side. So I said, "No," I said, "I ain't heard anything." I said, "Anything."
In Chicago, a desperate Mamie Till notified the local newspapers of Emmitt's disappearance. On August 31st, 3 days after Emmitt Till had disappeared, a boy fishing in the Tallahatchie noticed a body caught on a gnarled root in the muddy water. He informed Tallahatchie County Sheriff Clarence Strider.
My dad called me and asked me, did I have a boat in the river, and I told him I did. And then he said, "Well, we'll be down there in a little while," and he sent deputies down here to go with me, and we took the boat and went up the river. It was in a curve and a drift, and a foot was sticking up. And we tore into the drift and got to him, and got him out. Then we carried him up to the other landing and put him in the hearse.
Emmitt's body had been weighed down with a 75-pound cotton gin fan tied around his neck with barbed wire. The boy was so badly beaten that Mose Wright could identify Emmitt only by his father's ring. Mamie Till was in Chicago, surrounded by worried family and friends, when she was told that her only child was dead.
Those words were like arrows sticking all over my body. My eyes were so full of tears until I couldn't see. And when I began to make the announcement, that Emmitt had been found, and how he was found, the whole house began to scream and to cry. And that's when I realized that this was a load that I was going to have to carry. I wouldn't get any help carrying this load.
By the time Mamie received her son's body back in Chicago, 2 weeks after she had kissed him goodbye, Emmitt's murder was front-page news. His body was taken to a funeral home owned by A.A. Rayner, who had promised Mississippi authorities that he would keep the casket nailed shut. When Mamie Till asked him to open it up, Rayner refused.
I asked him, "Mr. Rayner, do you have a hammer?" I said, "I haven't signed anything, and I haven't made any promises. And if you can't open that box, I can."
We opened the casket. There was a terrible odor that came from the body because the body had been in the water and began to deteriorate. Mr. Rayner he told the mother, he said, "If I was you, I wouldn't look at this body, but this body is in such a horrible condition." She said, "Mr. Rayner, I want to see my son."
And I decided then that I would start at his feet and work my way up, maybe gathering strength as I went. I paused at his midsection because I knew he would not want me looking at him. But I saw enough that I knew he was intact. I kept on up until I got to his chin, and then I was forced to deal with his face. I saw that his tongue was choked out. I noticed that the right eye was lying on midway his cheek. I noticed that his nose had been broken, like somebody took a meat chopper and chopped his nose in several places. As I kept looking, I saw a hole, which I presumed was a bullet hole, and I could look through that hole and see daylight on the other side. And I wondered, was it necessary to shoot it? Mr. Rayner asked me, he said, "Do you want me to touch the body up?" I said, "No, Mr. Rayner, let the people see what I've seen." I was just willing to bear it all. I think everybody needed to know what had happened to Emmitt Till.
Mamie's decision would make her son's death a touchstone for a generation. At a church on the south side of Chicago, Emmitt Till's mutilated body would be on display for all to see.
It was on a Sunday afternoon. I won't ever forget, it was a Sunday afternoon. The church was very calm, the line was very orderly.
I thought that pretty soon the crowd would die down. It looked like all of Chicago was there.
Well, they brought the children with them because Emmitt was 14 years old, and they wanted the younger kids to see what happened to Emmitt. They were mad. They were angry.
And as we were led into the church, my girlfriends and myself, we walked up to the casket, and it was covered with glass. And we all looked down. This was our friend laying, looking like a monster. They said that about 1 in every 5 had to be assisted out of the building. They would just go into a faint.
I think black people's reaction was so visceral. Everybody knew we were under attack. And that attack was symbolized by the attack on a 14-year-old boy.
Soon and very soon, yeah, I'm gonna take a rest. Yes. Soon and very soon, yeah, I'm gonna take, yeah.
Sharpley's Funeral Home announces with deepest sympathy the passing of Edward Leon Teague. Mr. Teague was born October 22, 1949, to the late Elijah Teague Sr. and Alice Reynolds Teague. He departed this life February 11, 2015, at Decatur Morgan Hospital.
Are you that virtuous woman or upright man that's looking for the perfect attire to wear in the house of the Lord? Look no further. 4U Fashions has all of your apparel needs. Stop by 4U Fashions, located at 5325 Highway 31 in Tanner, Alabama. Or just call 4U Fashions at 256-432-2660. Again, that number is 256-432-2660.
Good Tax Services. Give them a call at 256-353-0379. Again, that number is 256-353-0379. Or stop by 1201 Danville Road, Decatur, Alabama. Let a good man do your taxes.
A celebration of life was held for Mrs. Odessa Griffin Bracken, 69, of Danville, Monday, February 16, 2015, at Oakville Christian Faith Center, with Minister Carolyn B. Orr officiating. Celebration of life for Miss Doris Dolores Hall Scruggs, 65, of Decatur, Alabama, was held Saturday at United Pentecostal Jubilee House of Prayer. Doris Hall Scruggs was born May 31, 1949, in Montgomery, Alabama. She was a resident of Morgan County. She departed this life February 8, 2015, at Decatur Morgan Hospital. Services were held for Willie Fitzgerald Brown Gordon, February 14, 2015, at King's Memorial United Methodist Church, with Minister Rodney Gordon officiating.
Aren't you hurting the budget of your organization? And I had to look at that person and say, I'm sorry, sir, you don't know me. I'm not a consensus leader, and I do not determine what is right and wrong.
Mainstream newspapers and magazines spread the story of the 14-year-old black boy who'd been brutally killed for whistling at a white woman.
It stunned white America. Most white Americans at that time were saying things such as the Emmitt murder had happened back in slavery times, that these kinds of things were not of their generation, that they no longer happened in America. And this said to them clearly, hey, it's right here, it is now.
Roy Bryant and J.W. Milam admitted having taken Emmitt Till, but claimed they'd let him go. The Till case had become a major international news story. Under the glare of the spotlight, white Mississippians began to close ranks. Local stores collected $10,000 in countertop jars for Bryant and Milam. Every lawyer in the county joined their defense team.
People of the socioeconomic level of the two defendants in this case were obviously looked down on by the more aristocratic whites, almost with the same disdain that they looked down on blacks. But they were still white folks. And when push came to shove, the white community rallied in support of them against a young black person for whom they had even greater disdain.
The atmosphere among whites in Tallahatchie County and the whole surrounding area was one of absolute scorn at the fact that these men were being put on trial for their lives.
On September 19th, less than 3 weeks after Emmitt's body was found, Roy Bryant and J.W. Milam's trial for murder opened in Sumner, Mississippi, which touted itself as a good place to raise a boy. The air in the courtroom, a reporter wrote, was as heavy and oppressive as the moss that hangs from the cypress trees.
in the courtroom, they recorded 118 degrees. And of course, there was no air conditioning. They had the ceiling fans that were only stirring the air up, making it hotter when it reached your body.
On the first day of the trial, presiding Judge Curtis Swango named the jury, all white men from Bryant and Milam's home county.
I remember looking at that jury, and even though I knew a good many of the men who were on the jury, and they looked mean to me, I would have hated to have gone up against any of those guys.
Tallahatchie County Sheriff and plantation owner Clarence Strider was responsible for locating witnesses and gathering evidence against Bryant and Milam.
Sheriff Strider was a big, fat, plain-talking, obscene-talking sheriff you would expect to find in the South. His actions at the trial were more, I think, he was not so much to seek justice of what was going on, but to be sure that his courtroom was totally segregated.
The man had laid it out that we got 22 seats over here for you white boys, and we got 4 seats over here for you colored boys. We don't mix them down here. We ain't gonna mix them, and we don't intend to. You ain't gonna be with the white folks, and the white folks ain't gonna be with you, and y'all might be speaking, but ain't gonna be no love nest between black and white folk.
Strider consigned black reporters and Detroit Congressman Charles Diggs to a card table on the sidelines.
We never have any trouble until some of our southern niggas go up north and NAACP talks to them and they come back home. If they will keep their nose and mouths out of our business, we'll be able to do more when enforcing the laws of Tallahatchie County and Mississippi.
The reaction of reporters from out of the South was one of just absolute amazement. They knew that there were strange things going on down in places like Sumner, but they did not know it would be quite like that. They were really surprised at what they found. At the same time, of course, they wrote about it with great relish because it was a good story. It had sex, it had murder, it had mystery.
When Mamie Till arrived, she had to make her way through an unsympathetic crowd gathered on the courthouse lawn.
What do you intend to do here today?
To answer any questions that the attorneys might ask me to answer.
How do you think you could possibly be a help to them?
I don't know. I mean, just by answering whatever questions that they ask me.
Do you have any evidence bearing on this case?
I do know that this is my son.
Mamie Till testified that the body she had examined and buried was indeed her son. In their cross-examination, Bryant and Milam's attorneys peppered her with hostile questions and then presented the main argument for the defense. The corpse pulled from the Tallahatchie River was not Emmitt Till.
They summed up by saying, "Isn't it true that you and the NAACP got your heads together and you came down here and with their help you all dug up a body and you have claimed that body to be your son? Isn't it true that your son is in Detroit, Michigan with his grandfather right now?"
With Sheriff Strider and courtroom sentiment clearly on the side of the defendants, reporters began their own desperate search for witnesses.
Black people wasn't speaking out about the Emmitt Till case at that particular time because they knew that it could happen to them. The blacks feared for their lives and for their family life because those white folks was for real. So it was just like hush hush, So I was told to keep my mouth shut, and that's what I did.
2 days into the trial, reporters got a lead on a young sharecropper named Willie Reed, who might be willing to talk.
I was in the cotton field, and I was picking cotton. And I looked across the field, and there must about 7 or 8 people coming across the field toward me. It was white and black coming that way. And then they began to question me about this here. Did you see anything? So I told them what I saw.
Put putting his life at risk, Willie Reed agreed to step forward.
Well, when you walk in that courtroom, and you know there you gonna testify. Then you look at all these white folks and everybody looking at you, and they got their frowns on their face and everything. You see them, they be looking at you, be rolling their eyes looking at you. Yeah, white, they just looking at you. It was something.
Reed spoke in a voice barely louder than a whisper. He'd seen Roy Bryant, J.W. Milam, and one other white man with Emmitt Till early that Sunday morning, and had heard the sounds of a beating coming from Milam's shed. After delivering his testimony, Reed was smuggled out of Mississippi. When he reached Chicago, he was hospitalized with a nervous breakdown. The prosecution's best witness was Mose Wright, who had clearly seen the men who took Emmitt Till from his home. Wright had been in hiding since the night of the kidnapping and had been threatened with death. But there, in the searing heat of a Delta courtroom, the 64-year-old sharecropper had his say.
One of the attorneys asked, "Do you know the man that came to your house that night to get Emmitt Till out of your house?"
Mose Wright stood and pointed first at Roy Bryant, then at J.W. Milam. "Thar he said. Wright later claimed he could feel the blood boil in hundreds of white people in the courtroom. But, he said, I had decided to tell it like it was.
That was a dramatic moment. And it took an awful lot of courage for him to get up there and do what he did. I think he had decided that he was going to do it no matter what happened.
After he testified, Wright left his cotton blooming in the field, his old car sitting at the station, and slipped onto the train to Chicago. He would never again live in Mississippi. The trial drew to a close after only 5 days. In his summation, the lead defense attorney warned members of the jury that their ancestors would turn over in their graves if Bryant and Milam were found guilty. Every last Anglo-Saxon one of you, he said, has the courage to free these men.
As the jury retired, the black people who were standing around the walls began to ease out of the door. I said, it's time for us to go. Congressman Diggs said, what? And missed the verdict? I said, Congressman, this is one verdict you don't want to be present to hear.
The crowd in the courtroom waited in the heat. Reporters overheard members of the jury laughing and joking in the jury room. In just over an hour, the jury returned.
In the Emmitt Till murder trial, the all-white jury has acquitted the 2 white defendants accused of killing the 14-year-old Negro youth. The jury foreman said the deciding factor was the state's failure to prove the identity of the body pulled from a river near Sumner, Mississippi.
A juror later revealed that the jury had stalled to make it look good. They wouldn't have taken so long to return to the courtroom, he said, if they hadn't stopped to drink pop.
The verdict came in not guilty. You could hear guns firing. I mean, it was almost like a 4th of July celebration. Or it was almost as if the White Sox had won the pennant in the city of Chicago. It was just, it was a mess.
After the trial, Sheriff Clarence Strider told reporters, I hope the Chicago niggers in the NAACP are satisfied.
People are used to doing things normal around here. And they just tried to run the thing. They thought they could run over the judge and the sheriff and everybody over there. They thought that they, could just take over. But they didn't.
How do you folks feel now that it's all over? Roy, how about you?
Reports of the acquittal made front-page headlines across the United States and set off an international firestorm. The life of a Negro in Mississippi, one European paper observed, is not worth a whistle. From Boston to Los Angeles, black people packed meeting halls and spilled into the streets to hear Mamie Till tell her story.
And what I saw was a shame before God and man. And the way the jury chose to believe the ridiculous stories of the defense attorneys. I just can't go into detail to tell you the silly things, the stupid things that were brought up as probabilities, and they swallowed it like a fish swallows a hook. Just anything, just any excuse to acquit these two men.
Protected from further prosecution, Roy Bryant and J.W. Milam sold their story to a reporter from Look magazine for $4,000.
We took them and we was just gonna whip them, scare some sense into them.
And tell me who's frontin', murder your sons, ravish your daughters, here, overseas, and across those